Those of us who live within the core of empire have a special responsibility to crumble that empire from the inside.
You wrote this in 2003, which was,
Yep.
like we were saying, it was the time of the Iraq War. We believe that as people living in the United States, it is our responsibility to resist the injustices done by our government in our names. Now, I'm reading this, 22 years later, and it's still resonating. Why is it resonating so much, as if you wrote this last week?
There are some people who are just waking up to the horrors of, the U.S. empire. I grew up in a household where we were embedded with truths about our country, where we were told to be very careful of anybody who was patriotic or that would wear or wave a flag. My mother told me the same time there's the famous talk that Black mothers give their children, in terms of the police, of like, if the policeman stops you, you tell them, I'm reaching for my wallet right now, and all this stuff, because we know how the police treat us. But in that same conversation for me, my mother said, and if you ever get drafted into our nation's military, we will leave the country. I will not allow you to fight for this country. And so I believe in what that statement is about, that we who live within the belly of the beast, those of us who live within the core of empire, have a special responsibility to crumble that empire from the inside. Now, what does that mean? In my sense, what that means is, the realization that this system has been built against us, that there is a duopoly at play, left and right, well, right and right, if we're talking about Democrats and Republicans, that are equally invested in warfare, that are equally invested in America's imperial endeavors, that are equally invested in dehumanizing Arabs and Africans, and making sure that we don't think about not only where our food comes from, right? Where our coffee comes from, where our chocolate comes from, where our oil comes from, where the rubber for our tires comes from, where the sugar comes from, but that we don't think about what we're being fed when we're being told repeatedly that we live in the most powerful nation on earth and that we represent freedom and democracy.